everyone. Let me stop here. How's everyone doing? So we've still got quite a lot of people still coming into the room, although I do want to get started fairly soon because there's quite a lot to cover today. But while we're waiting just a couple more minutes, because I have to keep admitting people because I'm on my own today, why don't you just pop a hello and where you're from in the chat there, and I think everyone should be able to see it. So that's always marvellous to meet people from everywhere as we do these monthly little gatherings. So I know we've got a lot of people who've come before, but I just saw on the list there's quite a few people, new people, so welcome to you. So just so everyone knows that this is, am I recording? Yeah, I am. This is, we get together every month just to have a chat about different subjects. This month we're talking about ESP, and there's kind of informal chats. So I saw also the list of questions that came in, and so we'll get to some of those early. Oh, we've got Deirdre from Ireland. I'm in Ireland today myself, and California and Slovenia. Is it Slovenia? And Brooklyn. Hello, Mary. So we've got people, always got lots of people. So I love about doing these on a Saturday. We get people from everywhere to come. So marvellous. So what I want to do today, as I say, there's still people coming in, so I have to keep admitting, so you have to excuse me as we keep doing that. But what I want to do today is talk about ESP, and I had a look at your very interesting questions there that a lot of people sent in on the registration form, so I'll get to those as well. So what I want to do today is, and I must say before we get started, I have a memorial mass to go to, so I know sometimes we get all carried away and do lots of practices and all the rest of it. I actually have to run out the door today to get to a mass across town, so we won't be able to go long today, but we should have some fun and hopefully it will be interesting. So what we're going to do is, I just want to talk a little bit about ESP, what it is, and who has it. A lot of questions that came in were, does everybody have it, or do you have to be born with it, and all this kind of stuff. So we'll get, how do I develop it? Big question, how do I develop it? So we'll get to some of those things as we talk here today. I want to also take a look at, because one of the really interesting things about ESP is the amount of attention it's getting from the scientific community. So that's very interesting, and of course it really appeals to me because for so long, you know, we've been caught in sort of the idea of, you know, black cats are bad luck and witches are this and all the rest of it, you know, that, you know, psychics are just fortune tellers and or frauds. And so it's marvellous to see such a serious amount of study being given to ESP now. So one of the questions people come up with all the time is, what's the difference between psychic and extrasensory perception? And really, psychism is extrasensory perception. The difference in it is really at this point more like perception. You know, over time, psychics have kind of accumulated the sort of fortune telling sort of idea stuck to them, whereas ESP is kind of considered, you know, worthy of scientific study. And really the language is the same, but I kind of feel with ESP it's more directional, there's more focus, there's more intention in what we're doing. So for example, extrasensory perception can start with something as every day that everyone has is intuition, having those intuitive senses, to precognition and telepathy and, you know, psychokinesis, moving things around. So there's a lot to that, which is very directional and intentional, as I said. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. I also want to talk about, I have a 6-week course coming up for all of the people who are saying, how do I actually develop this? It takes time, takes practice, everybody can develop it. And I did design a 6-week course around this, so we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. And then I've got a couple of little exercises, so it depends on how our time goes, to give you a little practice on a Saturday. So you know, hope you've had your coffee. So we'll do like a little practice. So I've picked a practice where you can kind of work with it either with remote viewing or with clairvoyance or clairsentience or telepathy. So you can choose, and we'll just experiment. I mean, you don't learn, you don't develop ESP in, you know, 40 minutes on a Saturday afternoon, but we shall certainly hopefully have something interesting to say about it, and also have a little bit of fun doing a little practice. Of course, there's lots and lots and lots of practices designed to develop all the different facets of ESP, and we'll talk about that as we go as well today. So the first thing, and as I think a lot of the things I'm going to talk about sort of cover a lot of the questions a lot of you had, so we'll go along with that, and hopefully most of those questions will be covered just over the next 20 minutes as I'm talking, or 40 minutes. So one of the big questions was, does everybody have extrasensory perception? Of course, the answer is yes. The difference is some people have it more developed than others, or some people work on it more than others, but everybody has an innate sense of extrasensory perception. And part of this is because we know this just from our own work within this field in mediumship and in trance and in extrasensory perception, and also from the scientific research that we are, and of course the ancients, the Buddhists, the Hindus, the indigenous religions have known this all along, is that we are all in one single stream of consciousness. So we have these ideas that we are separate little people running around, and that somebody who's psychic or somebody who's a medium has some special gift that, or some power greater than us, which is not the case. The difference is some people, it's like I say this, most of you have heard me tell this a million times. It's almost like it's not a question of do we have it, it's a question of degrees. People have things to different degrees, like people are musical to different degrees, people are creative to different degrees, people are mathematical to different degrees. So these are just more facets of human nature, and some people are more attuned to their extrasensory perception or their mediumship or their trance or their psychokinesis or any of these things than others. Having said that, there are plenty of practices, trainings, exercises that you can do to develop all of these to the best of your ability, and to continue developing them as you go. So I'm just going to ask, you can just pop this or put your hands up, So for example, have any of you ever met somebody and you immediately talk to them, or immediately the hairs on the back of you can just put your hand up on the little windows, the hair on the back of your neck, so I gotta get away from here. Or you've walked into a place, and as soon as you walked in the door, you're like, oh, this place is really creepy. Or you've walked into somewhere else, you just immediately feel peaceful, right? So you're probably all somewhere or another. So that's extrasensory perception. That's that inexplicable feeling that goes beyond this idea of what you can see, smell, taste, or whatever is real. We know that there is a whole other dimension of reality that our 5 normal physical senses don't detect, but our extra senses do. Our clairvoyance, our clear seeing, our clairaudience, our clear hearing, our clairsentience, our clear sensing, our claircognition, just that sense of just knowing. I'm sure there's lots of you have had that experience where you've just had a knowing, and you can't explain how you've got the knowing, but you've just got a knowing. That's claircognizance. It's your extrasensory, one of your extrasensory perceptions, right? So we all have it. Or have any of you been talking to somebody and they say, that, sorry, still people coming in, they say that 70% of our communication is non-verbal, right? So somebody's talking, but there's a whole lot more story. I mean, we work with this a lot in mediumship. There's a whole lot more story there than just that what's actually coming out of somebody's mouth, right? And so you could be talking to somebody, but you're picking up a whole other layer of the story there, just from things that they're not saying at all, but you just have a knowing about that. So I'm sure lots of you have had that. We do that without even really noticing it, right? We're aware of how somebody will make a statement, but the way they make the statement, they could be angry or sad or indifferent or whatever. It's the same words, but we have a sense of what's going on there with them in ways that they don't say. And again, that's that sense of clairsentience, that sense of just knowing and sensing what's going on with somebody. I'm sure a lot of you have had dreams that you have a dream and you wake up and some part, and it's a weird little dream, but some aspect of it you suddenly see out in the real world, or you see some sort of symbol, you go to sleep and you see whatever, you know, and a smiley face, and you wake up in the morning, first thing you see is a smiley face, right? So all of these, your extrasensory perception is always there. It's like it's always running. It just really comes down to how sensitively have you developed it and how are you aware of it. Like it's not something you sort of put the hat on, do it, take the hat off, go on about your business. It's a way of being, right? Extrasensory perception is a way of being. It's like you don't wake up and consciously say, I think I'll just go about without opening my eyes without seeing today. Or I think I'll go around today with earplugs so I don't have to hear today, right? We don't do that with our physical senses. So we're never doing that with our extra senses either. We're just not always aware that they're firing, that things are working, that we're picking up this information. And we can pick up some things very, very well, maybe other things. Some people are very clairvoyant, they see images. Some people are very clairsentient, they can feel what's going on everywhere they go. Some people have precognition, where they have dreams or just senses of things that happen later, you know. So the fun thing about ESP is we can actually use it and harness it. So while I say ESP is a way of sort of being and living in the world with an extra layer of sensory perception in the world is what we're really dealing with, we can learn the techniques to enhance that, to sensitize ourselves to that. But we can always also learn techniques that are really useful. You know, so there's a few people here I know taking my psychic detective class, and in that we do remote viewing to try to see where a missing person may be. And so that idea of learning remote viewing, which is using your extrasensory perception to sort of see remotely something away from you, we'll play with this later, can actually help find missing persons. I've done quite a bit of work on this myself, you know, so, or crime scenes, which is what we do in our psychic detective class, right? You can also have, this is sort of this takes a lot of energy, so we don't see it that often. We have experimented with it in our extrasensory course last year, is telekinesis, which is where we actually move physical objects. It's actually quite difficult. It takes a phenomenal amount of energy. It usually works best with a group of people there. So there's an old spiritualist thing they used to do called table tipping. A bunch of mediums would hang around a table and start telling the table to move, and the table would start. I've actually seen this, and the table would go around the room, out the door and down the corridor, you know. And it's actually the telekinesis, or the psychokinesis from a bunch of mediums directing that intention. So it's marvelous, really, really exciting stuff can go on when we start playing with and using and experimenting with our ESP. So, so aside from just it being part of our lives, you know, part of our sort of our sense of intuition, or a sense of don't go down that dark alley, you know, or get away from this person, that's our extrasensory perception. They're helping us all the time, you know, keeping us safe. It's also like our intuition is helping us make decisions. So the more we do these practices, we do practices to develop these things, the more we do our sitting, our meditation, our empowerment practices, the stronger our intuition becomes. And the stronger our intuition becomes, the better guided we are ourselves in our lives. You know, because we're tapping into something greater than ourselves to connect to that stream of consciousness. But also, we are accessing the wisdom of the spirit within, of the inner spirit, of our own intuition, which is the voice of the spirit, to help us make decisions. So many of you have sat there and you've put a list together and said, oh, 5 pros to this decision and 5 cons to this decision. I used to be a great list maker in my day. I've given it up. And you go, here's all the advantages of, say, changing a job or moving house, and here's all the disadvantages, right? And you could have 20 disadvantages and only 3 advantages, but somehow you have a knowing it's still the right decision, right? That's the quiet voice of the intuition, beyond logic. It's always beyond logic, which is marvelous, because the more we practice it, the more we use it, the more we just sort of step into that flow in the world, the more we see the results of it and the more we trust it. Because quite a few of you said, how do I trust it? Well, you trust it by doing. You don't just sort of pop out of bed one morning and say, oh, I trust my extrasensory perception and intuition implicitly. It's like anything. Trust is earned, right? We do it. We see, oh, that was the right choice. I listened to my intuition, it was the right choice. The next time you'll do it again and again. So it develops. We earn it, right? We earn it by seeing, by trying it, by listening, and taking those little steps. And it really helps us make decisions that are really better for us in our lives as well. But not only that, it can also help us with other people, because you can imagine somebody's telling you, I'm fine, and you get a sense, no, they're not, right? And you can stay there, you can pay attention, you can listen, you can be there with them. So it helps us a lot for ourselves and this is just the day-to-day, daily, your everyday ESP, you know. I mean, you can pick, I used to experiment on the New York City subway. Don't necessarily advise that to people, but I used to sit there and try to sort of pick stuff up from the person, you know, across from me. And I got talking to, I remember one guy one time, and he had a black dog, and he was sitting beside me, and I said to you, but you have another dog as well, or do you have a big brown dog? And he's like, yes, I do. How did you know? And it's just this sort of playfulness that I don't advise running around any mad place, picking up stuff from complete strangers like this. But I used to just play with this walking around, you know, how I used to play with standing, you know, there's another thing you can do, which is great fun. I would stand at the traffic. If you're in a pedestrian city, there is just endless opportunities to explore this. Stand at a traffic light and just sort of feel into the space behind me, to feel like how many or who's standing behind me and where are they? And you would get a sense, oh, there's somebody here. You would turn around, the person would be there, you know. And I used to do this all the time, and I got very, very, very sensitive to the space around me. Again, the thing about ESP, when we learn the exercises, there's lots and lots and lots of practices we can do. You just have to keep doing it, you know, keep doing it to develop that sensitivity. It's like anything. But I remember one time being on the Lexington Avenue subway, which is about 2 stories tall. The subway is really, really long. It was late at night. And I got on at the top of the escalator, and I was miles to go down to the lower level floor. And there was nobody anywhere in the subway. And it's very late. And I had a sense that I had a young Asian guy behind me on the escalator. And I, you know, turned around. There was no one there. The whole way down the escalator, there was no one there. And I could have sworn there was an Asian guy standing behind me. And when I got off the escalator down the bottom, didn't the young Asian guy get on the escalator at the top? So it just goes to show you how far our perception can permeate. Because he was obviously only coming down the block when I first got a sense of him. So it'll show you how far reaching our perception can be. Just a matter of, we just keep doing it bit by bit by bit, you know, and that sensitivity develops over time. And everybody's capable of doing that, you know. And so these are, you know, and this is aside from, you know, like I'm a writer, I know a lot of artists. I'm convinced that when we actually start tapping into that consciousness, that's where an awful lot of inspiration and art and literature and everything else comes from. And so it's marvelous in that sense as well, in terms of just tapping into not just your intuition, but your inspiration, you know. And it can ultimately, when you start to see these things happening in the world, you know, when you see, say, a symbol in your sleep and you wake up and you see it out into the world. Has anyone had that happen to them? I'm sure quite a few of you have had. And it just gives you this sense of it's a little part of something greater. When you start seeing it coming back at you, you can actually start to see the spirit moving in the world. Does anyone have had that experience? It doesn't have to be a symbol, it can be anything at all. You just have a knowing, you have a sort of a precognitive sense of something, and then it happens. There's a few people putting their thumbs up. And then you have this sense of something, and then it happens. And then, you know, isn't it marvelous though? Because I think for me, that makes you realize, you know, that you are actually so firmly connected into something so much greater than our little selves. We're in this endless stream. And so it's important to it, because I think it gives us a great sense of connection and meaning. And I know in the world, there's been lots of studies done on the crisis of loneliness. There's a crisis of loneliness that was only amplified by COVID. But when we start to see these things happening, we can start to see there's something greater always with us. Something greater always working with us. And it's just a matter of us starting to turn our awareness to that. And it brings with it that great sense of connection and belonging to something greater. And this is not just little tricks that we do. You know, this is not just throwing out a few tarot cards. This is actually a way of being in the world. Developing your ESP being able to move with that level of intuition and foresight and knowing and awareness in the world greatly just enhances the texture and the richness of our own existence, you know. So before, a lot of you know my story, before my fiance died, I had been a diehard skeptic, right? Now, I had seen people stand at the end of the bed when I was a kid, and I had all of that sort of thing going on into my early teens, lost interest, you know, in college, too uppity, you know, in my 20s, so, you know it all. But when my partner died, you know, people were like, oh my God, that's like terrible, like, isn't that, feels like your own life is ending. And I had to say afterwards, you know, when I became very much aware of his presence still was there, it kind of like was a light bulb turning back on, sort of bringing back to the fore a lot of things experienced that as a child. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. And here it is back again. And people were saying to me, how do you live since he died? But the awareness that just exploded, just this massive, bigger sense of being in the world, and a bigger sense of connection, and a sense of something so much greater than the little self. I remember saying to somebody, I have no idea how I lived before he died. So when we start to experience this level of connection, this level of presence and power that we have within ourselves, I feel, to me, that's when we're really living. That's when we're really understanding what life, what the spirit, what the story, what the picture, the bigger picture of what it is, in what the world is, and what our part in the world is. And God knows we need so much more of that, because so many people are in so much need. They really need people who are aware, who are spiritual, who can pause and just be aware and listen, because that's a lot of what happens with this. We start to listen. We start to listen to what's not being said. And when we understand what's not being said, we can really, our ability to contribute is just amplified. Does that make sense to you all, the way I'm talking in riddles? Yeah, Victoria. Yeah. Marvelous. So I just want to talk a little bit about, just very briefly, about what's going on in the sort of parapsychology, the psychology, the neuroscience, and scientific research, just because I think it's really interesting, because like we who have been working with ESP, have been developing psychic senses, extrasensory perception, have been working with precognition, or I actually have a little list here I can show you on the website of what extrasensory perception is, because I didn't get into the individual aspects of it. But you can see, you know, we've got clairvoyance, that ability to see, understand intuitively through colors or images. We'll play with that later. Clairsentience is that ability to sense subtle energy, everything that's, you know, that all of the dark alleys at nighttime, or the terrible house, or the lovely person, whatever, that's all clairsentience, that clear sensing. Clairaudience, it's just that inner, we often will hear a whisper. I don't know if any of you have heard that. Sometimes you're just washing the dishes and you hear this little whisper. It's clairaudience, you're hearing the voice, something beyond yourself. Telepathy, we'll play with later as well. We do all of these, we cover all of these in the course too. Telepathy we work with is just being able to sort of project your thoughts to another person, which is really interesting. Because I remember one time somebody visualized a mammoth and was focused really obsessively on a picture of a mammoth, and was trying to project the mammoth to a boyfriend who was in a different country. And do you know what he saw? An elephant. Isn't that amazing? Like, it was so close. So this is possible. This telepathy is possible. We can do loads of really interesting experiments with telepathy. Precognition, obviously, is that sense that sort of seems to spark on its own. It's very hard to sort of sit down and say, oh, I'm going to, you know, have a prophecy. You know, but often when we start working with this quite a lot, and starts to become second nature to us, we start to naturally have precognitive dreams, for example, or hunches. The word hunch, right? The hunch is sort of a form of precognition. I just got a feeling this is going to go well, or it's not going to go well. Form of precognition, the hunch, you know. And psychokinesis, as I mentioned, is moving physical things around. Usually takes an awful lot of power from a lot of people. Another thing that's not on that list that we do work with when we're actually training in extrasensory perception is divination, which is a very old indigenous practice of, you know, candle readings. People often, you might have done candle readings, you sit and you use the candle, or the clouds. The Irish Druids used to read the clouds, and you get prophecy and wisdom and inspiration from reading, the candles are reading the clouds. So that's a really remarkable, the amount of information that you can pick up from divination. So we work with these techniques as well. So these are all aspects of ESP, which are marvelous, you know, absolutely marvelous. And you can decide to sit down and work with some, or you just embody some, like, you know, like some levels of precognition, the idea of the hunch or the intuition, clairsentience, all of these things. These things are naturally with us and running all the time. And so when we decide we want to do things like telepathy or things like that, obviously we can actually set an intention and sit down and do that. But all of the rest of this is going on all of the time, whether we're aware of it or not. So part of what we do when we start developing ESP is actually start just working with our own awareness of what we're already doing. And then we start layering in practices that help us develop the sensitivity to really move through the world with that heightened sense of extrasensory perception, which is great fun, I have to say, and marvelous as well. So just to say a few quick words about the science of it, which is marvelous, because I think what we've kind of always known this has existed because we've experienced it. And it's one of those sort of ineffable qualities. You can experience it, but how do you prove it, right? So part of it is science doesn't really have, even for scientists who are open to this, science is still sort of slow to develop the tools that are needed to measure it. But they are working with it. So there's a few interesting things going on I'll just mention here. So first of all, we are living in a sort of a post-materialist, I've been working on my new manuscript era, where you know, the materialist idea was that science and extrasensory perception are completely incompatible, right? Completely. So, but now we are moving into that post-materialist stage where more and more and more scientists are realizing they're not incompatible at all. We just need to develop the tools to measure them, right, which they've been doing. So I'm a member of the Society for Psychical Research. If any of you are interested in the science of this, I recommend you can get a membership in the Society of Psychical Research, the very old society in England, or the IONS, the Institute of Noetic Studies in California, Dean Radin's place. They do a lot of ongoing work in this field, so it's quite interesting to see what they're doing. So there's a lot of fields like parapsychology, neuroscience, consciousness research, which is really interesting because consciousness research is coming to the conclusion that consciousness is not an emergent property of the brain, right? So the idea has always been the brain creates consciousness. But what we know is that's not true, and we know this from mediumship. If that were the truth, there'd be no possibility of mediumship, right? Because there's no person, there's no physical brain. So we've always known that consciousness exists separately from the brain, but scientists are finding now ways to start measuring this, which is quite interesting. And sort of the prevailing sort of theory now is not that the brain creates consciousness, is that the brain is more like an antenna that's tuning in a drop of consciousness from this one stream that we're all part of, which is fascinating because all that means then is that when the antenna breaks, when the brain dies, the stream is still there. It's like a radio, you know, you can turn a knob, tune in a station, there we go, marvelous. But if the knob breaks, the radio waves are still there, right? So this is what they're starting to see now. Consciousness is the brain more like that sort of antenna, like the radio knob, tuning in an aspect of the one single consciousness, the one mind, the superconscious, that then we identify that little droplet that we're tuning in as us, right? This is how we come to be. And so that when we sort of take away the idea that the brain creates consciousness, all of this opens up this whole world of extrasensory perception, of mediumship, of this kind of the near-death experiences. It actually makes way for all of this to happen. So the good thing here is that scientists, a lot of scientists and a lot of very credible scientists who are doing some really interesting work are stopping with the question of, is it real or not? And are starting with the assumption, it is real, so now how do we measure it? Thank God, finally, right? It says us. after all this time. So that's marvelous. So there's really some interesting work going on in that. So, and you'll get the recording of this, so if you want, and I think there's a transcript also in the recording. If you want, you can scan it and get some of these names if you're interested in working or reading up any more about them. But like people like Dr. Don Hoffman, Dr. Gary Schwartz, Dr. Dean Radin, who I've spoken to a few times, are doing quite a lot of work in the area of consciousness and ESP as well. The Windbridge Research Centre is doing a lot of work in working with mediums, and there's quite a lot. The Division of Perceptual Studies, University of Virginia, is all starting. They're doing an awful lot of research around this idea. And then there's, by extension to that, and the Australians, I don't think I saw any Australians in the room today, an Australian scientist out there talking about how it really, what we really are is in, it's what existence is really more like a panpsychism, which basically means that all matter, which is what we say when we say the superconscious, all matter and everything in it, all consciousness, all energy, is all part of this one single unified stream, right? Which is we often say the one mind, right? It's all part of the one mind. Now, the other thing too is that if anyone's interested in looking at that idea of the consciousness, it's called the extended mind hypothesis, and that is that the mind extends well beyond the brain. Dr. Julia Mossbridge is doing some interesting work on that, so you might want to check her out too. We've all heard of the near-death experiences. This has probably single-handedly been the biggest influence on people saying, clearly, this exists. And that's because it came from the doctors. Raymond Moody, as we know, did the first major study on this. The neuroscientist, the neurobiologist Eben Alexander has written about his experience. So there's an awful lot of work and a lot of actual solid scientific research been done on the near-death experience. A lot of the findings are very hard to debunk. There's always people running out, only too delighted to debunk everything, but a lot of the near-death experience findings can't be debunked. So I remember seeing a documentary on this, and I can't remember the name of this documentary, and I'm always trying to find it again, but there's one where they interviewed a doctor, a surgeon afterwards, and his patient had died, and there was a sheet over the patient's head, and the doctor had a pain in his back, so he was standing, you can't see me on this, but he was standing with his hands on his hips like this, swinging his arms, after the surgery, and the person who was dead under the sheet just started breathing again and, came back to life and actually described how he was able to see the doctor swinging his arms. And they interviewed the doctor afterwards, and you could just see he was completely baffled. There's so much research done on this that it's very, very hard to refute. So that's been a huge, that's been, movies start writing about this in the mid-70s, so that's been in existence for quite some time. We know mediumship also, as soon as you remove the idea that the brain is only a conductor for consciousness, it makes mediumship, makes it comprehensible to people. And the Windbridge Institute is doing a lot of research with mediums. Gary Schwartz did a series with mediums, and I can't remember what the name of the study was, but he worked with a lot of students out there, or a lot of mediums out there in Arizona at one point, and John Edwards was part of that as well. I actually saw an interesting thing there. There's a scientist called Dr. Jeff Tarrant, and I was at a lecture of his at the SPR there a while ago, and they did a massive amount of study of wiring psychics and mediums up to little nodes, electrodes, and then mapping the brain. And that was marvelous to see, because you could actually see all of these loads and loads of diagrams of the brain waves in the brain changing when people started moving into altered states of consciousness to work with mediumship. What they noticed was that the frontal lobes, that are usually quite active, started slowing down. You could see it gradually as the colors were changing, the little maps of the brains that he had, that the frontal lobes were slowing down to do mediumship, and the I don't know all the parts of the brain, I can't remember. At the back of the brain here, it's responsible for visual imagery, started getting very, very hot and very active, which happens when you're using your clairvoyance. So you could see it mapping out in the brain as the brain waves were moving, slowing or speeding up depending on what the person was doing, but certainly not reflective of a normal brain space at all. So it was really fascinating when you actually see them going, oh, holy God, look what's going on here. Well, they don't say, oh, holy God, but you know what I mean. Look what's going on here. We can see the brainwave deliberately changing from normal waking state in waking mediums or in waking psychics. We can see the visual cortex, so we can see the visual parts of the brain that process images of the back of the brain heating up and the front slowing down. So it was really interesting to see that happening as they're going through this research. So it was wonderful. I'm sure I'm a bit nerdy about it because I'm like, finally there's ways to start measuring this, which is wonderful. Somebody just pointed out, I just saw pop up there, the Stargate is a remote viewing process. We do, the Stargate program was the CIA program where they were using it to spy on the Russians and vice versa. During the Cold War, we actually still use it. We use the whole handbook in my psychic detective class of actually learning how to remote view. The Stargate project with the CIA utilized these remote viewing abilities to start spying, which is great when you think about it. And we also have what's happening more now, funnily enough, anybody who's aware of Timothy Leary, remembers Timothy Leary, or Richard Alpert, who's now known as was known as Ramdas afterwards, were all bounced out of Harvard for experimenting with psychedelics back in the day. Well, the psychedelics are back in very reputable places like the Imperial College of London, the Johns Hopkins University. They're doing some experimentation with psychedelics, and to see that introducing psychedelics, how it's expanding that sort of mind-brain idea and how all sorts of interesting things are going on. So that's marvelous. So lots of stuff going on, and there are some people looking back to some of the indigenous spiritual traditions as well and bringing those forward. So anthropologists are looking into that as well. So across the board, in all sorts of disciplines, I know people are popping all sorts of stuff up in the chat. I can't cover every single part of this. I've only got 20 minutes to talk about it, but I'm just trying to give you the broad strokes of the sort of more well-known and the larger studies that's going on within science. But it's really interesting that from the psychologists, the parapsychologists, the anthropologists, the neuroscientists, that there's actually the consciousness theorists, there is a broad range of disciplines within the scientific community who are now finding the tools to measure these things that we have all known and experienced, So that's great. So this is why I kind of like the idea of working with ESP, because we can actually see some really interesting scientific backing to this. So for me as a medium, it was really fascinating to see Jeff Tarrant's study of all of the changing in the brainwaves as the altered states came into being. So, as you said, when we start to think about ESP, we're talking about clairvoyance, we're talking about telepathy, precognition, psychokinesis, all these marvelous things, even mediumship. And it's not necessarily just mediumship with the dearly departed. I mean, we've had a lot of these reports from the near-death experience people of actually meeting these powerful, compassionate, beautiful beings. Now, if we don't necessarily have to wait until we're dead to do that. When we start developing our extrasensory perception, we start to develop our awareness of our part of that consciousness, so that we may become aware of those, powerful beings, whatever you want to call them. Some people call them angels or guides or whatever you want to call them, who are moving into this or in this space with us, and who we can rely on and who we can turn to, and we can be aware of that connection with them. Isn't it marvelous? And you just sort of know in your darkest, loneliest moment, you're not alone. Isn't that beautiful? Somebody there, you have to do is speak to them. So it's marvelous. So I just want to very briefly, I think I've covered most of your questions, because then I just want to tell you a little bit about the 6-week course we have coming up. So it's 6 weeks, you show up for 6 classes, but we have lots of exercises during the week. And so it's a great fun, really experimental course that are designed to really have fun with developing ESP, because people come to mediumship class, for instance, it's like there's so much weight and ethics and everything involved in mediumship. it's different. We have really got the space to really explore and experiment with extrasensory perception, which I love personally. So a lot of people are asking me how you can access and develop it. Everybody has it. We really have lots of different exercises that we use, to different ways to start developing different aspects of it. You know, the telepathy, clairvoyance, remote viewing. It's a matter of really, it's like anything. There are ways to learn it. We can teach it. I can teach it in terms of, let's do these practices. We just do them over and over again. A lot of it is that a lot of it is just an ability to be open and to surrender to it. So I kind of find that in some of the questions I got in, it's like, how do I harness it? How do I turn it on? How do I turn it off? We don't harness, turn it on or turn it off, right? We are it. And what we want to do is learn to be open, sensitive, and to be able to surrender to the power of it so that we embody it, and then it just is. Does that make sense? I know it gets a bit riddle me this, but it's not something we do. We don't set out and say, oh, between 4:30 and 6:45, I'm going to do this. I mean, you can, and we certainly do that when it comes to things like remote viewing and telepathy. We have these great fun experiments. But in terms of how you move through the world, intuition, hunches, your precognition, all of these things, your clairsentience, all of these things are there. They're with you as you move through the world. It's like you move through the world with your eyes and ears open, listening and seeing. That's the way we move with extrasensory perception. It's not something we turn on or off. It's just how we are, right? We just unfold those abilities and we deepen those abilities within us. We deepen that sensitivity within us, and that's how we move through the world. Now, when you're doing, like I said, psychokinesis, you know, precognition, telepathy, these things, you can practice those with partners, because there's lots of that. Like I said, you know, the remote viewing is a key part of psychic detective work, because we use it to walk crime scenes and find missing persons. So some of that is really, really useful to society in the larger sense. So we just do lots of fun experiments. So there's loads and loads of fun experiments you can do to develop this. I love it because it's really, oh, you know, there's no real parameters. I've got to get it right. I've got to get, you know, there's none of that. It's just like, let's have lots and lots of really extraordinary experiences. And that's what I love about extrasensory perception. It's all about, let's just have more extraordinary experiences, which is marvelous. How do you trust it? I talked about that already. How do you use it for mediumship? So that's one thing I want to say. So ESP is not mediumship. ESP is the sort of the language that the spirit uses to communicate in mediumship, but it's not the mediumship itself, right? So we use clairvoyance, clairaudience, claircognition, clairsentience to receive and interpret information from the discarnate spirits of the dearly departed, and then that's the language that this information comes to us with. So the more we can develop those faculties, the easier it is for the spirit world to then communicate with us. So anybody who's interested in mediumship, it used to be taught that the whole first year, in some cases 2 years of any mediumship program, when I started out, the first year or two of any mediumship program, proper mediumship program, was you had to just do psychic development. You had to do all of this work first, so that when you started communicating with the dearly departed, you knew what language they were speaking, right? You understood the language. Now there's a bit more people just kind of want to jump in and get on with it. But really, these abilities are the language that we need to develop for the spirit world to communicate with us. So they are different, but one is necessary for the other. So I hope that makes sense. So some people ask me some huge questions that are really honestly beyond the scope of a 1 hour talk on ESP, like how can ESP be map onto psychotherapeutic concepts of transference and countertransference. That's an entire 2 hour lecture in and of itself, so I won't get into it here. I think it was Alexa, did you ask me that question? But what I will say is that, you know, a lot of transference and countertransference is coming through unconscious communication. It's coming kind of from intuitive insights or emotional resonance. So I would say in a lot of that work, the ESP is already there, it's already working. And then it's just a matter of having that much more acute awareness of what is being said and what you're sensing so that I guess I'm not a therapist, so I don't want to get in, I don't want to overstep. But when we understand what's coming through us through extrasensory perception, what we're picking up from the other person, it becomes easier then to differentiate what is coming, what is ours, and what is theirs. So really, this is, that part of it is more like you need to talk to a therapist about that. But in terms of the ESP, I think it's always there, you know. And then I think what's helpful is if we understand where or how and where and why our own ESP is actually firing, then I think it probably will make it easy. I would imagine it would make it easier to understand what is actually being transferred, or what's a counter-transference, if that answers. And it's very brief, but it's a very big question. So that's that. So I know lots of people have been popping stuff in the chat. I can't really check, I can't monitor the chat when I'm here. But what I do want to do is I just want to play a very short 90-second little video about my upcoming course, if I can figure this out. And then what we will do is we will come back and we will, can you see that? No, not yet, can't. We will come back. All right, can you hear that? Do you want to awaken your ability to live an extraordinary life? Yes. Do you want to develop a heightened sense of awareness beyond your normal physical senses? Well, you can do this by developing your natural extrasensory perception. It's that sixth sense that we're all born with, that ability that can turn the ordinariness of life into an extraordinary experience. The good news is that everyone has this ability, and the even better news is that you can develop it and enhance it with training and practice. I'm Karen Francis McCarthy. I'm a certified spiritual medium and best-selling author, and I've designed a course where you'll learn to work with techniques to develop telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, psychokinesis. You'll do practices that are rich in color, feeling, and symbolism. We'll work with divination techniques, subtle energy, dream work, and imagery. So these practices are a great way to both start and expand your sensitivity and intuition into the phenomenal world of ESP. So are you ready to tap into the power of your potential? Join me on an unforgettable journey of spiritual transformation. You never know what hidden talents you may find with just a bit of exploration. Right, so this, if you're interested, I'll pop this link in the chat. But this there's quite a lot of detail here on the course that's coming up, if any of you are interested. It's my favorite course to teach, I have to say, because it's like so experimental, so fun. It's like just limitless, which is marvelous, which we don't get that opportunity with, say, healing and mediumship. You saw this already. What is sensory perception? A little bit on the science. Not as much as I talked about today, but of course you can get the transcript of today if you're interested in checking out any more of the work of any of these people, which I do recommend. I made a little sort of 4-minute video, which I'm not going to play here, but if any of you are interested, it's a little 4-minute video on why we really should develop our extrasensory perception as we move through and live in this world. So you can watch that there on your own time. Some lovely things people said who took the class before, which is marvelous. So this is just also a little bit on a look inside the program, you know, what abilities we're going to work with. You can see there, we'll be working with telepathy, precognition, psychokinesis, divination, all of the clairs, which is all great, really experimental. We'll be doing experiments also together during the week, which is marvelous. You can work on telepathy and remote viewing with each other. You can work on dreaming and precognition with each other. So we have loads of great experiments. It's a really lovely group. It's a very, very small group for that reason. I usually take about 10 students because it's quite a small group, because I need to make sure everybody gets along when you're actually working that intimately together. So that's that. And then in terms of, we'll work with here, like the altered states of consciousness, we'll work with each other. I love the dream work, is great fun, and the divination is great fun. And then also, you know, I have the Spirit Space Facebook group, so you can connect with each other on Facebook. So it's a private group. You can connect with each other during the week on that as well. And so that's quite a lot of fun. And then lots of lovely things people said. Now, one thing I do want to say is, for all of you lovely people here. Oh, where's my thing? There is at the moment, just for you, a special offer, which is $25 off the course. So just use that code there if you want to do it, and that's the URL there at the bottom, some ESP25 on my website. We'll send this out to you with the recording from today afterwards. But if you want to do that, you can hop along and get $25 off. And like I said, it's only 10 places because I really do try to keep it very closely monitored, and I can't really do that with more than that for students, you know. So that's that. What else did I want to say? So do come along to that. All right, so I'm going to do a very short practice. I do need to finish up soon to get to the memorial. I'm just saying a couple of people very brief, very quickly as the thing was playing. Somebody asked me if I use the Monroe materials. You know, I did years and years ago. I didn't really find them particularly helpful. I mean, I'm not discounting them. I know some people do. I didn't. I find that on my website, for any of you who are not a member of my Spirit Space community, on my website, let me see if I can pull it up. There are practices for, let me see. There are practices for developing these, which are free. We've got a free library here of resources. So anybody who's not a member of Spirit Space, you can join there for free. Just go to community, and we have the listening space. We have works and I also now have the mediumship minute, which is every day a very short sort of 90 second little video, 2-minute video goes out on mediumship. But in the listening space, and I'm not logged in, so I don't know if I can show you this. Oh, I can. So in the listening space, we have that's the premium library. We have a free library here, and these things, this practice here, the power of the spirit, and all of these meditation practices are marvelous, marvelous practices for helping you enter into those states of attunement that you need to really develop and attune to these sort of unseen layers of consciousness as we go. So they're all free, so you can just pop along to that. You can join that for free, and that's in the free library. And I do recommend practicing those. I have always found, for the person who asked, that those have always helped me more. But if somebody wants to try the Monroe materials, what's it called? The name for the recording, can't remember the name of it. By all means, give it a go, try it out. I mean, the whole thing is experiment, try. It works differently for everybody. Different people respond to different things. Throw out a wide net, explore and enjoy what's going on, and see what works for you. Might work great for you, something that doesn't work for somebody else. Same holotropic breath work. I mean, there's loads and loads of this sort of stuff. So you can I would say just go and experiment. We've also got a reading list on my website. In that Spirit Space community, there's recommended reading. So you'll probably find a lot of interesting stuff there in terms of if you're interested in learning more about the science of all of this and the different opportunities that are around. I'll actually update it at some point shortly, as soon as I get this manuscript off my desk. So I won't go through all the rest of it because I am mindful of the time. So what I want to do is, we just want to have a very short little practice, right? And so what we're going to do is, I've got something here, which I'm not showing you, in my hand. And so you can try this on number levels. Just everyone take a breath, get settled. We're going to try to work with this on a number of levels. I want all of you to get a sense of what I have here in front of me, right? Now, there's a few ways that this can work. If you love remote viewing, you want to practice remote viewing, you know what the mechanism is for remote viewing, you could try to remote view and just see what it is I have in my hand. If you're clairsentient, you might want to, or clairvoyant, you might want to get a sense, of a color or a shape or a texture. If you're clairsentient, you might get a sense of, like, is it hot or cold or hard or soft? You might get a sense of how it feels. If you're particularly claircognizant, you might just know what it is, right? But what I would say is, I'm just going to give everyone like 5 minutes, 7 minutes, just to sit with this. Now, what I will say, if you try to guess, you will definitely be wrong, right? Because if you're guessing, you're in your head. So the way to do this work is to not try to guess what the whole of it is, but get a sense of different aspects or elements of it. Like, you know, heat or colour or hard or soft, or, you know, what's going on, or random things. Just be open to sort of random things. It will come to you if you're really working with your extrasensory perception. You're going to move into an altered state. If you go to the altered state in the free library there, you'll get better at moving faster into the altered state. Obviously, it takes about half an hour sometimes at the beginning, so we don't have time for this. But just take a breath, get settled. The other thing is, if you want to try getting a sense of this using telepathy, I will hold what I have in my mind, and I will focus obsessively on it. And so you can try to attune to me to sort of telepathically pick what's going on. You can try to remote viewing just to actually remotely see what's here in front of me, or you can use any of your clairs. But what I will say is, even with the remote viewers, go just feel your way through small fragments and, you know, just sort of fragments, little abstract pieces. Don't try to, what'll happen is if you try to go, oh, well, I feel something soft, she must have a marshmallow, right? What's happened there is it could have been, you know, it could have been something soft, it could have been a grape. But the mind will go, it's got to be a marshmallow. If you try to create a whole picture, that's the mind. A lot of the challenge and a lot of the work we do in ESP is learning how to keep the mind over there busy doing something else and not interfering. Because I guarantee you, anytime the mind gets involved, it is never helpful, right? It will always make 2 and 2 equal 5. So just get comfortable with little bits of abstractions. So we'll just spend about 5 minutes on this, and we'll pop it in the chat, and then I'm going to have to run to the memorial. But you know, just think in terms of little fragments, abstractions. Even if you've got a pen, you just feel like drawing an angle or something, do that. That's how we work with remote viewing. We start off by just trying to sense pieces and abstractions, because we start trying to, like I said, very, very quickly. Here's an example. I was working doing remote viewing many years ago with somebody, and she was, don't know where, she can't remember where she was. I was in Brooklyn, and we were remote viewing, and then I had to email each other afterwards with what we sensed. She emailed me afterwards, and we were to try to figure out where each other was, right? Because this is what you do when you're looking for missing persons, right? You're always looking for signs or landmarks. So she emails me afterwards and she says, I think you're in the Catskills. I was in Brooklyn. And I said, why do you think I'm in the Catskills? And she said, because I saw a bear, right? Now, had she just left it at that, I saw a bear, I saw a brown bear, you're somewhere where there's a brown bear. I mean, that could have been California, right? Because it's on the flag. But instead of leaving it there, she said, you're in the Catskills. Well, the truth was, I was sitting in Brooklyn outside, and somebody had hung a little brown teddy bear to the tree in front of me. Right? So this is what I mean. Remotely, she saw the bear, but the mind then made 2 and 2 equal 5 and decided the brown bear must be the Catskills. Right? So just stick with the fragments, right? And we'll just pop the fragments into the chat afterwards, because this is how we start building it. We start with the fragments, and then we learn to start building on this without the mind being involved. Mind never helpful. All right? Everyone got that? Everyone good? You all excited? All right. Telepathy, try to attune to me. Remote viewing, just try to remotely view fragments, sections, bits of what I'm holding in front of me. Don't limit yourself. The only thing that limits this is your mind, right? So, and then anybody who just wants to use a clairsentience or clairvoyance, by all means. So there's lots and lots of different ways you can do this. So let's just take 5 minutes. And just to sit, take a breath, get settled. I'm going to just sit and stop talking and turn off the microphone and just sit and focus obsessively on what's in my hand. And then you guys either try to attune to it or me. All right? Marvelous. So just take a breath, get settled, let all of the thought, all of the science, all the everything go out of your head. Still the mind, allow the breath to still the mind. Just take a minute to do that. And then we'll just have a few minutes just to see what abstractions, abstract things, abstract elements come to you, all right? If you find you've gone into your mind and you're trying to make sense of it, just take a breath, let it all go, come back just to the breath, still the mind. Don't let yourself be limited. Whatever comes to you, allow it come. Okay. Now just pop in the chat any elements or any impressions that you had. Better to give me elements and fragments and impressions than try to describe the entire thing. So just pop in there the chat just for a few minutes before I have to run off. So silver cold, longer than black, bat, marvelous. So there somebody said, like Victoria, black wings, flying, Batman. It's you know, when the Batman part of it is the mind taking some elements that you thought to create something out of it. That's the real challenge of this. I mean, you just do it and you get it. But the mind's a terrible thing. It doesn't like having nothing to do, so it always has to sort of get itself in there doing something. So it takes a bit soft and squishy. Bit of soft and squishy in it. Yes, metal cold. Yes, black. Yes, triangle. I don't know, maybe triangle. There was something red though, there was. Hard with angles, yes. Red, rose gold, metallic, paper, yes. Metal cold, yes. Circles, pencil holder, and a wood grain. Wood grain, I believe so, yeah. Neutral, yeah, most definitely. Cool to the touch, yes, definitely. White, hard, rounded, sculpted, sandy beaches. So the sandy beaches, whoever wrote sandy beaches, that was really good. But what happened there was your mind interpreted why it was actually sandy as a beach, but it's not a beach, and you'll see in a second. So this is what I mean, but well done. It's really amazing how fast the mind comes in to try to make sense of something. It really doesn't like not understanding things. That's the hardest part about this, actually. The rest of it's easy. Sharp corners, yes. Clear, yes. There is something clear with it. What else have I got going on? What have I missed here? Round yourself, squishy, yes. Round, yes, that's good. Green leaf, green frog, and orange. It's hard to know with the colours. You'll understand in a minute. I was looking though, somebody said here, a green leaf and a green frog. Just before the class, I was actually looking at one of those, you know, those self-watering things you put in plants with frogs on them. And I had a feeling something like that would happen. I was like, I bet you something I was looking at before the class, somebody will pick up. I was looking at one of those, you know, watering sticks. There was a frog on the top of it. That's funny, so you got that. Round or oval objects, yes, maybe glasses. Not quite glasses, but glass. Yeah, your mind creates the glasses, but you did have the glass. Oh, a balloon in and out. Would you believe what the other thing, the other stick, watering stick I looked at was an owl. So you're all, the owls and the frogs, obviously still in my head. You're still picking them up. Ask your personal maroon color. I think there was red in it, so maybe dark red. Wings, bird blue, wings. Box like, yeah. So you all ready for the big reveal? Yes, you're all excited. But you see, I wanted to look at this first to show you that there were elements in what you were getting in what I've got. And that's what's really important when we start out developing ESP, is that we focus on the elements, because that's where we need to be. Because when we start trying to connect all the elements together, we'll take 2 and 2 and make 5. So it's brilliant. I love the way most of you are just doing, really getting the head out of the way and just going with the texture or the textile or the sense or whatever was going on. Is marvelous. So what we've got here, if you can, where I can see, is a photograph. You see, so all of you who had cold, hard, or yes, all of you, but then the reason why I picked this, I actually had an apple. I thought you haven't got much to work with. The reason why I gave you the photograph is because there's a lot more to work with, because not only do you have just the texture of the frame and the glass and stuff, you also have bits of the image. So a lot of you, so these, all of you had sandy, squishy stuff. These were actually sandy colored bags full of wool. So they were squishy, and the horse was brown. Some of you had, I think, wooden texture, which was over here in the building. So you were actually getting, some of you got glass, which is not the glasses, but it's the glass frame. So can you see the way most of you were getting elements of this? But the reason why I gave you this was because I was like, you might, some of you might see a bit of the image, like see a dog, see a horse, something like that, you know what I mean? So that's why I thought there was more elements to work with in this than say an apple, which I ate anyway. But it's great, isn't it? Because what happens is when you start getting used to being, when you start getting the mind comfortable with just the elements, then what happens is they start building it more and more and more and more. And yeah, so Melissa, you're saying the hard rectangle, absolutely. But when you start going, I thought it was a deck of cards. The deck of cards is the mind. But your extrasensory perception got the fact that it was a hard rectangular thing. This is what I mean. It's about the sandy beach. It's the bear on the tree. The mind always tries to make sense of things. And the key to extrasensory perception, to developing it, is to let things just emerge and be the fragments they are. And over time, that becomes more and more whole. But it's becoming more and more whole from your extrasensory perception, not from the head. See what I mean? The writing on the back and bottom of it says, John Devine, Black Hole Parade, circa 1940. That's actually my grandfather. He loved that horse. God, he loved that horse more than life itself. That was actually taken across the street from where I currently live. There was a woolen mills there. People were saying red. I believe that sign was red or dark red. So I know some people were saying they were getting a sense of red as well. So that is marvelous. So I'm sure I didn't go through everybody's thing, but yeah, black frame, black box. But again, you can see when you just go, I've got a black square, you know, it's like, it's always paring it away down to the elements. That's just a matter of just doing it and doing it until it becomes a habit, until the mind becomes comfortable with it. Simple as that. It happens, you just do the practices and there it comes, you know. Yes, Batman was a man. I'm sure my granddad would love to be connected with Batman, but I'm not sure about that. But anyway, did you enjoy that? Did you have fun with that exercise? It's a bit tricky, isn't it? Because it really is sort of disarming the way we normally think. And that's really where we want to go. We want to disarm our normal everyday perception. And then we use these different techniques that, you know, to actually then allow the extrasensory perception. Here's my taxi. Hang on a second. Hold on. Sorry, taxi outside to go to the church for a funeral. Yeah. So that's what we do. We just sort of let we move beyond the mind into allowing these fragments to emerge. And you can see that it's just a matter of shifting what the mind is doing to allow something to arise, right? And it's great fun. I love doing these exercises because, you know, it's just so experimental, it's so open, so limitless, you know. So there's loads and loads of those practices. That was just one quick one I thought was an easy one to do, because you can use different faculties and different types of extrasensory perception to work with it. So I hope you enjoyed it. Marvellous. I'm so happy to see you all. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you go to the website, check out the course. I would love to see you at the course. Like I said, it's only for 10 people, so we can really experiment with this over the next 6 weeks, and then go to the free library and check out some of those. Somebody was looking into horseback riding. Yeah, no, it's funny. It's amazing what we start to see when we start to connect things, and we see how interconnected everything is when we start to really live from this place of extrasensory perception. So marvelous stuff. We'll get you an email out probably tomorrow with the links to the recording, etc., and with the code with the special offer if any of you want to join me for the course, and we'll have great fun. So I hope to see you all there, or some of you there anyway. And have the good rest of your day and weekend. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.